Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham. Some of the largest fashion houses in the fashion world are in Europe, including Louis Vuitton. Founded in 1854 in Paris, it's become a leader in fashion, particularly men's fashion. And in 2018, the company made history, announcing its first black man as lead creative director of menswear, Virgil Abloh. The Midwest-born fashion icon made a statement with the appointment, and in his short time at the helm, Virgil helped usher in a new, fresh take on the brand. He brought in streetwear, making it chic and high fashion. Virgil Abloh passed away in 2021 at the age of 41, but the legacy he left behind lives on today. Joining us now to talk more about the life and times of Virgil Abloh is author and Detroit native Robin Givhan. Robin recently wrote Make It Ours, Crashing the Gates of Culture with Virgil Abloh. And Robin was most recently the Washington Post senior critic at large, where she wrote about politics, race, and the arts, and a Pulitzer Prize winner for criticism. Locally, Robin has written for the Detroit Free Press. Robin, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so you are a Detroit native. What part did you grow up in?
I love that. Well, I went to Renaissance High School, right?
Nice.
That's like the Detroit question.
Nice. You already knew. You came ready. Well, that's amazing. So you're a Renaissance grad. We know you're a Detroiter through and through. So for those who do not know and anything about Virgil Abloh, who is he and what were his contributions to the greater fashion world?
Well, as you said, Virgil was a Midwestern guy. I mean, he grew up in Rockford, Illinois. And what makes him so distinctive is that he didn't have traditional fashion training. He hadn't gone to fashion school, and he hadn't apprenticed in, a long list of design houses. He really came to fashion through streetwear and T-shirts and sneaker culture. And he was also, a DJ on the side. And when he was appointed to Louis Vuitton menswear, it was really groundbreaking in the sense that, one, again, this untraditional background, but he was the first Black person to work at that level at Vuitton. And he brought in a sense of community and a redefinition, really, of what luxury was and is and can be.
Yeah. And if you can, take us back a little bit. What was the fashion world before Virgil and the introduction of streetwear? What were we looking at before then?
Well, there was absolutely streetwear, which, the long history of streetwear sort of, I trace it from, what was hip hop and what had been called urban by a lot of retailers. Yeah. It sort of blossomed into streetwear, which includes a lot of the gestures from hip hop fashion, but also includes sort of skate culture and, just youth culture in general. And, a lot of things allowed Virgil to succeed. It was the fact that streetwear was really coming into its own. It was the predominance of sneaker culture. It was the fact that menswear itself had become such an important part of the fashion industry that was really having an effect on the entire industry and leading the way in terms of trends. And then you also had, at that moment, this real interest in fashion of looking beyond the usual suspects. The phrase DEI was not something that was considered, a third rail. It was something that was considered sort of a necessity and what was just sort of right and wise in trying to reach a broad consumer.
And for a lot of folks who aren't familiar, of course, with Virgil and his rise to the top of the fashion industry, Virgil and rapper Kanye West for years were close. You talk in detail about the relationship of Abloh and Kanye West, especially around 2005, around the time Kanye spoke that an infamous line, George Bush doesn't like Black people on live television, next to comedian Mike Myers. Talk about the connection between Kanye and Abloh and how the two were able to connect through fashion, but how Kanye became a mentor and kind of put him up towards those folks who he needed to be next to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I sort of like to refer to him as the artist formerly known as Kanye West.
Thank you. Yes, that needs to be put out there.
Right, in part, just to underscore for people that, the person that Kanye was sort of publicly and within the fashion world at that particular time was very different from the person that he has sort of evolved into in the public consciousness today. And at that point, he was sort of just coming off of two really successful hip-hop albums. He had the financial ability and the name recognition to really open a lot of doors to get phone calls returned. And even though, he was this sort of controversial figure, he was still someone who the fashion industry, was enamored by. And of all the things that he wanted to do, in addition to becoming, the king of music, he dreamed about building a fashion brand. And to do that, he really gathered around him anyone that he thought could sort of help in that endeavor. But in the process of doing that, he also inspired a lot of the people who were around him. And Virgil was one of those people. Like, they had this kind of serendipitous meeting in Chicago when Virgil was studying architecture in grad school. And you could still kind of bump into someone in Kanye's circle, just by happenstance. And, I wish people can just sort of imagine what it might be like if you are a young person with big dreams and you sort of feel like the kind of dreams that you have are a little bit forbidden to you because of cliches about what you're supposed to be interested in. Yeah. And you find someone who shares those interests, who is as excited as you are, who is willing to just talk and talk and talk about fine art and fashion and designer brands and, furniture design and just a wide range of creativity. I mean, it was really quite a cyclone of ambition. And, Kanye had entree into a lot of the big fashion houses because of who he was and what he wanted to do. And in a lot of those moments, Virgil was by his side, working with him, eventually becoming sort of a creative director for him, but really just there for a lot of those meetings and introductions and seeing how the industry worked.
Just to know this research and reading your book and learning how instrumental Virgil was to Kanye's creative, look for so much of what he did. It really just is just like, I don't know, was Kanye the person who was creating my childhood, or was it Virgil at this point? But but I just think about the book expert. In the book, you talk about the T-shirt and what the T-shirt meant to Virgil Abloh, especially as we talk about just breaking into this industry with this new freshness of a look of what should be chic or what is fashionable. And I think as soon as I read that little excerpt from the book, I thought about the way that the T-shirt changed Hollywood when Marlon Brando roared in a movie for the first time. And at that point, no one was wearing T-shirts in movies. And then Marlon wears a T-shirt in a movie and he changed Hollywood in terms of the way people were dressing in movies. So can you talk about how the T-shirt for Virgil kind of did this change for the industry the same way that it did back then for Marlon Brando?
Yeah, I mean, the T-shirt is sort of fashion's equivalent of the blank canvas, right? I mean, it's a garment that is, not gender specific. And it allows you to kind of put your own creative flourish on it. And it doesn't require a lot of sort of technical skill, right? Like, you don't have to, be an expert tailor or seamstress in order to be able to, sort of embrace a T-shirt and make it your own. And around the time that Virgil was starting to sort of investigate his own fashion ambitions, there had been other designers who had taken the T-shirt and they'd put it on their runway in a nod to street style. And one of the most influential was Riccardo Tisci, who was the menswear designer at Givenchy. And he put this T-shirt on his runway that had this giant photo print of a Rottweiler. And it was kind of just weird fashion magic, right? Like it was the right moment, it was the right image, and the right people wore this T-shirt, the right celebrities. And it kind of became a thing. And, this T-shirt was like $500 or $600, which is insane, but in the scheme of designer merchandise is kind of an entry point to the brand. So you had that kind of floating around out there, and you had Virgil, who was interested in fashion, who loved graphic design. He would talk a lot about Helvetica font and how it was like the most perfect font. And so it sort of made sense that the first sort of dabblings that he would have in fashion would be using T-shirts. And it was with this art project, as he called it, called Pyrex Vision. And he bought discontinued Ralph Lauren rugby shirts, and he silkscreened them with the words Pyrex and the number 23, which was Michael Jordan's basketball number. And that was kind of the beginning of his starting a brand. And, after doing the research, I've been sort of advising parents, if you've got a teenager in the basement making T-shirts, egg them on, because you do not know where it could lead.
I love that. And if you're tuning in right now, we're talking about a new book, Make It Ours, Crashing the Gates of Culture with Virgil Abloh. Our guest is author and Pulitzer Prize winner, Robin Givhan. And Robin, before we go, because we were down to the last few moments here, I do want to switch gears just briefly, because there is a lot going on in our world right now in terms of free speech. You write about more than fashion. You speak more broadly about culture in the U.S., and free speech is under attack. The recent murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk has brought out various views, including Jimmy Kimmel speaking his mind on a late night show, and it was put on pause, which it will resume tonight. As well, Washington Post columnist Karen Attiah was fired for social media posts about Charlie Kirk recently. Journalists and writers are angry, including Jim Acosta, who sounded off recently about Attiah's firing. What are your thoughts about the recent termination of Karen Attiah, who was using free speech on social media? And what are your thoughts right now just on free speech in our country?
Well, it's obviously incredibly troubling that any element, and particularly obviously the government, trying to pressure companies into clamping down on the ability of people to speak their mind is deeply, deeply troubling. And, I obviously support, the role of institutions to be able to speak truth to power. And so it is particularly unnerving and worrisome when it's institutions that are backing down and not standing up and not supporting the ability of their staff and their employees to speak up. It is one thing, certainly, to advocate for actual violence, and we all understand that that is not something that we should be doing. But if we're not allowing people to speak up and to speak their truth, then we are lost, I think.
Robin, thank you so much. Art is free speech, and so is fashion. Fashion is free speech. Robin Givhan is the author of the new biography, Make It Ours, Crashing the Gates of Culture with Virgil Abloh. Robin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.